Right, hi there. I'm Dan Sumption of Peakrill Press and the author of King Arthur versus Devil Kitty. And I have with me here Maximillian Hartley, the illustrator of King Arthur versus Devil Kitty. Now this is going to be really interesting actually because Max and I met online. We'll go into this, but haven't met in person and haven't had a lot of conversation outside talking about King Arthur versus Devil Kitty. So I want to talk a little bit about that, but also I want both for me and for the viewers to find out a bit more about you, Max.
Yeah,
Um, so we'll kick off with King Arthur versus Devil Kitty, which is the adaptation I'm currently running a Kickstarter for until the 21st of September. Illustrated book that if my camera were any better, you could probably see what it might look like with illustrations by this man here, um, of a 700-year-old tale in which King Arthur hunts down a ferocious kitten in the Alps. So plenty more details of that on the peakrill.com website and links to the Kickstarter. But pictures, the amazing pictures which contribute so much to this book, are by Max here. When I first was kind of mooting the idea of doing this book, I tweeted a little bit about the story, and I remember, Max, you got in touch with me. I didn't know you from anywhere, and I seem to remember you said something along the lines of, "I really want to do the pictures for this. Can I do the pictures for this?"
yeah, no, definitely.
What was that kind of experience for you? What sort of made you so keen to do this?
Oh, I can't so I think I found you through Twitter through a friend of a friend. I've been doing a project with Barnaby Dicker did we were doing a thing called Trickster's Net, and I did the artwork for that, and then I somehow it linked to you, and I saw what you had tweeted, and I'm just a huge, like, it sounds silly to say, but I'm just a huge King Arthur fan, and especially the
Yeah,
sort of more unknown, older, sort of esoteric stuff. So like I've done a lot of reading of some really boring, like they weren't not they're not actually boring, but some quite dense
I
like
know what you mean.
dissertations about the origins of the King Arthur myth, and the oldest ones, and it's one about a giant boar, and this one about the kitten. So I knew about it, and I knew
Oh,
there
you
wasn't
did,
much
right?
about it out, and I'd always wanted to. I'm a really big fan of the illustrations by Aubrey Beardsley's King Arthur,
Yeah,
and I
yeah,
always wanted to go at doing something like that. Although not stylistically, I just like the idea of
yeah.
sequentially at some point having worked on a King Arthur thing.
Hmm.
So it seemed like a really good lineup to get to do a thing that I sort of been wanting to do.
That's interesting because I mean, it's kind of nothing like Aubrey Beardsley stylistically, like you say, but the I was revisiting an old Peakrill Press blog post from about 18 months ago, and it was talking about how if there is a Peakrill house style, it would be sort of fin de siècle, sort of the art of the likes of Sidney Syme, who is my particular favourite, but I also mentioned Arthur Rackham and Aubrey Beardsley. That were the three names in
Mm.
there.
But yeah, I think they're all of them are good. Yeah, I think yeah, the style of the book's interesting as well because I always set out with to on projects, or I do, sort of with an
Yeah.
idea in mind, and then it always sort of moves around based on usually limitations in technology, I find. But
Yeah,
yeah, how the house style landed, because I think you said you had an idea for a 70s children book
yeah,
theme. Sort of that was the over, and then on my stuff doesn't tend to be that funny, really. I'm not that realistic at drawing, but I'm also not that
yeah,
drawings aren't that light-hearted. They very often come out like lino blocks, and so I
yeah.
think the landing in the middle is quite fun.
Well, when I saw so like I say, you reached out to me and said you wanted to do these illustrations. I looked at your stuff and I was like, it's good, and it's kind of it's part way there, but I'm not quite sure if it's got that kind of kids picture book, humorous, whatever. And what I then did was I put together a mood board of like a whole bunch of different illustrators and styles and things that um, were going around in my head. I sent it to you, and you just came back and just hit the nail absolutely on the head. And I think testament to that is that so many people who've talked about this project have just been blown away by it. I've just been interviewed on a podcast oh gosh, I'm trying to remember what it's called. It was called Wobblies and Wizards. It's now the Hosts Gang. Anyway, I've just been interviewed on a podcast where the hosts were just effusive in the praise of your artwork. That was like the thing that really blew them away about this. You know, my sort of journeyman adaptation of a piece of medieval prose into modern but cod medieval poetry is one thing, but the illustrations really lift it to another level.
Yeah, well, I think I mean, I'm really glad they liked the guys on the podcast liked it. No, I'm always, it's always nice to hear. But no, I think
Yeah,
I think they work well together. I think the writing and they both bring sort of separate
yeah,
elements to it.
yeah.
I think it's really fun. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there's a sort of a bit of darkness, a bit of humor. English comedy, I call it, because it's another thing I often refer back to is the kind of Monty Python sort of
Yeah.
holy grail relationships with this book. And yeah,
No, I
so
think I thought that
maybe,
too.
I mean, should we sort of move off that a bit and tell me a bit more about your background as an illustrator? Like, how have you
Oh yeah. No,
evolved to where
I'm
you
happy
are
to,
now?
yeah, I'm really happy to talk about that. I liked drawing a lot as a child. I was always drawing sort of swords and dragons and all things, Jurassic Park, I don't know, those sorts of
Mm,
anything.
mm,
And then I decided at some point that I wanted to do. I thought being a video game concept artist seemed like the coolest job going. And so I sort of decided to study to do that probably while I was still at school, and then did art college. Well, did college, and then went to university to study video games, and then didn't vibe with the coding thing at all. And then I switched into animation and did animation for did a whole sort of undergrad on it. Um, and developed this style of working in Photoshop that's really laborious, which is the same one I use now to build these images, which is sort of all self-taught, no sort of shortcuts. It's really clunky. It's basically using the program as if you're screen printing,
mm.
like layer by layer, and then just never rubbing things out or leaving all the mistakes in, and came up with this really strange way of, and then frame by frame, I used to do that to animate in Photoshop, and the results were, I thought, good, but very, very just took ages. And then I did one project after that, freelance, and decided I didn't want to do that anymore. It took 9 months to do this 3-minute film, and it was the film was nice. It was for a launch video for a book for this other author, but it just took so long.
Yeah,
And
video is a nightmare like that.
yeah, and then I
The
went back
animation.
to studying. And I went to the Royal College of Art in London, and I did a course. I specialised in experimental communication, which was like sound
Wow.
and 16mm film, movie film, old-fashioned movie film, and I sort of specialised in ones that sort of seemed to self-destruct or break as they played, so very unsaleable. No, it was nice. One of them showed in China once. One of them showed in a cinema in London in a festival once, but I
Cinema didn't blow up.
yeah. And then
You didn't do a Werner Herzog and like nick a 16mm camera when you
I
left
did
your course.
try. I really tried. There was one that I had. I had it for about a year longer than I was supposed to, but no, they kept asking for it back, and I caved in.
Yeah, but that door was bolted after Werner left film
Yeah,
school, I think.
yeah. But no, I always kept illustrating, and then it was really in lockdown. I stopped for ages. I focused on film. I was focusing on writing and filmmaking, and then during lockdown, Barnaby reached out to me. I think it was an old tutor of mine, and he was doing this project, which was a mix between, it was for young people. It was students in Germany and students in Wales doing sort of role play, how to build a role play game, I think it was. And they wanted some sort of leading artwork for it. And he contacted me. He'd always liked my work, I think, and I hadn't spoken to him in about, I don't know, 5 years. It was been a while. And it was a really good project to get me back on. I wasn't really, because lockdown was such a strange time. It really felt like I couldn't do much of the other work I'd normally been doing. And so I really enjoyed that. And then a different friend of mine contacted me about doing, he needed someone to do some artworks for a TV series, The Devil's Hour, the Amazon series. And so I did the detective in it. He's one of the Doctor Who's. Anyway,
Was this kind of like
Capaldi.
Just like
So
concept art or
it was
kind
no,
of.
it's a prop. So it was like all. It's one of those
Okay.
ones where the detectives walk in and they find this room full of like paper on walls connected with string, all
Oh yeah.
theory. And so I had to do some of those. I mean, there was a whole art department on it, but I was brought in to do some quite specific illustrations. And so yeah, so I sort of started rolling that around again and just doing illustrations again. Um, it wasn't necessarily, yeah, I don't sort of consider it a career avenue. It's just sort of when I see projects that take my fancy,
Hmm.
it's nice to be able to do them.
Gosh, that rings a bell. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can really relate to that. Um, and
Yeah.
actually, I mean, that brings me on to something else. You're not just an illustrator. You've written a novel, which I haven't read, but I have had a look at it, and it's not just like, oh, Max has fiddled around and written some words down. It's a proper novel. It's really good.
Oh, yeah, it did take a while. I mean, it's very, yes, it was very, I took it quite seriously.
Mm,
I think I'd written something before that was a novella that was terrible. It wasn't good enough to
mm.
publish, and it was in sort of Anglo-Saxon prose or quasi-Anglo-Saxon prose, and it was this sort of epic about someone in this forest, and it just didn't. It was
Not sort of,
fine.
not sort of like Paul Kingsnorth, The Wait kind of thing.
Yeah, no, similar. He was. It was the same time I was writing it. He was writing his one, and it hadn't
Wow,
come out. I did fund his one. I got one of the first copies of it because
I
I.
did as well, and my
Yeah,
name's in there.
yeah. So no, I really liked his work. Yeah, and I thought, oh, we're doing sort of similar stuff. But then when I finished mine, I was like, this isn't.
Mm,
I'm not a good enough writer. But then the next one, this recent one, which is a much more
yeah.
traditional novel, I just thought I'd take my time on it and just spent. It's been 4 years now, I think. The
Mm.
writing of it. I mean, it's sort of, yeah, it was 4 years when it was finished. So
So
it
do
took a
you want
while.
to tell us a bit about the novel?
Yeah, so it's
What's it
a
called for starters?
oh yeah, so it's called Peregrine Earth. It's a reasonably traditional novel. It's set in the 1850s, and it sort of apes 1850s language. So it's sort of a bit like Moby Dick or Blood Meridian. Same year as both of those books are set, sort of 1850 to 1851. But I
Mm.
thought I wanted to do one about the Highland clearances. I spent a lot of times in the Highlands and on the islands specifically, and I thought it was a sort of just not tackled. I think there's so many
Mm.
good films about
Yeah.
things that have happened in Ireland by great Irish writers, and you just would think that someone would have funded and made. I originally thought it'd be a film script about the Highland clearances, and I just thought I knew enough about it as a tourist to write a
Mm.
book from the point of view of someone who was maybe a tourist going there in that time period. And then it's about someone who's hired from Glasgow to go and clear these Gaelic speaking sort of indigenous people off their land, and about
Mm.
sort of it's sort of like I don't want to spoil it. I mean, I don't think,
Yeah.
assume it's not out, so you can't buy a copy anyway. But it's sort of an inversion of the white savior narrative that takes place in like Pocahontas or Dances with Wolves. It's about someone going to an isolated community of sort of noble savages and not changing their ways and sort of executing their initial vision as planned, and the fallout of that on the Gaelic community. Yeah,
Mm.
but it's
Wow.
it's sort of historical novel. It's elements of magic and the sort of yes, I don't know, sort of the sort of Celtic magic that maybe I've imagined, but that I certainly thought you could pick up on some other sort of carved rocks that still are around those islands.
Mm.
There's an element of that sort of battling with incoming 1850s sort of enlightenment, as it was,
Mm.
yeah.
So it's got a bit of that kind of old world, new world
Yeah,
kind
yeah.
of
I mean, I thought it was a magical
clash.
realist novel about sort of selkies and stuff. But when I sent it to Faber for them to review it, like to assess it and see if I could
Right.
improve it. And they thought
Yeah.
it was pretty much a straight historical novel and didn't pick up on the magic in it. So I was trying to do something quite complicated with it, where if you read it with magic in your heart, it would come off as a magical realism thing. Whereas if
Yeah.
you didn't, it wouldn't. And I haven't got enough people to read it yet to see if it worked.
Well, do you know what? I've read like the first couple of pages and skimmed it a bit and just enough to see that yeah, this is kind of, well, as far as I can tell from that amount, it looks like the real deal. But having just had you describe it to me now, I think I'm gonna go off and read the copy that you sent me.
Oh, yeah. It does. I
And
think it gets a bit better as well. The writing. My feeling on it is if there's a weak point, I think it gets
you
stronger towards the end. I think.
you did. I noticed from your Instagram as well that you did a lot of research. You were posting pictures of some of the books that you were kind of reading to
Yeah.
the background. Do you want to go into any of that at all? Sort of
Yeah. I mean, it's
interesting
really.
things.
Yeah. I mean, I think the best one I found was it ends in Australia. It ends with a family who are sort of cleared to Australia. Sort of you know, it's not an epilogue, but the last part of the book is set there.
Mm.
And I've been to Scotland and done lots of first-hand research, but for Australia, I haven't been there, and I can't go there easily. Not on the budget I had.
Not
And
after what happened. They won't
no,
let you
no,
in.
yeah. But then, yeah, so I found all these, but it seems like Melbourne's done a really good job documenting their early history. They seem much more keen on it than all the other places I was looking. And there was a book there by a miner, a Scottish miner from the Highlands who'd been cleared, and he was there in 1855. And it's just his day, it's just his diary, but it's been digitized, every page of it. It's all handwritten, but I sort of spent hours deciphering it, reading about what he was eating for lunch,
Wow.
what was going on, what the seasons are like, what plants he encounters. And there's all these ones about like a tiger escaping from a zoo one day, and all the miners having to like stop this tiger. And that was one of the most sort of obscure and gem-like things, you know. That I
Yeah,
found.
that sounds amazing. That's like proper research. I feel slightly like a charlatan now with my kind of my King Arthur story with my I have been reading a hell of a lot of Arthurian stuff in the last year, but
Mm.
I don't know, when I saw the pile of books that you posted on Instagram, I was like, oh, have I this
Oh,
guy's the
it's just posting
this
them, you
guy's the
know.
illustrator, and he's done more research for writing a book than I the writer have done for mine. But yeah, that's cool.
No, I think your one. I think your one carries. You know, I think the words they carry it really well. I think you
Oh,
can feel the definitely feel the Monty Python thing in it, and then yeah, the kids book esque stuff. I think it's really good.
yeah,
Um,
I'm actually, so I mean, as we speak, we're about halfway through the Kickstarter. I'm all goes well, we will be moving on to kind of getting it ready for production at the end of September, and I am doing a sort of final edit with quite a lot of, yeah, I'm giving it a good old shake, and I think there will be it will become a bit longer. I think it will also become a bit funnier and a bit yeah, they'll draw those elements out a bit more. And
yeah,
actually, a lot of that has come from your pictures. I think it's, you know, I think it's one thing when you kind of just like hire a jobbing illustrator and go, here you go, I want this, I want this, I want this. But one of the really nice things of working on this with you is that I've given you the story. I've gone like, for this page, this little scene here would be good. You've given me something back, and I've looked at it and gone, yeah, no, that, and then I've gone back and rewritten because of something I've seen in the picture.
yeah,
And I'm going to be doing more of that, and that's a big part of what I'm doing for the weeks.
yeah. And I think that's fun. I think it was quite. I imagine it's not a unique sort of way of doing things, but I think the way
Mm,
we've been lucky enough to do it has been it's been over a very long time period to produce. You know, like these,
yeah,
there's not millions of images in this. There's sort of 12 or something,
yeah, yeah,
and it's been quite a long process of producing one and then getting feedback and then then you've
yeah.
rewritten a bit and I think it's been nice because you get to settle into the. It is my. It wasn't necessarily my intention to be this slow. I'm always about twice as slow as I expect to be, but
Yeah,
but it is the way I prefer to work because you get to really know not
I,
just the
I,
subject itself, but like the mood of the piece.
yeah.
Yeah, and I
I
think
think
that.
I think I think we're kind of kindred spirits there as well. I'm, you know, there's a part of me that is like, oh God, I started on this like 2 years ago, and I'm still trying to figure out what goes on in this bit. But actually, it's that slow build. There's a great quote from Alan Garner from he was on Radio 4 on Ramblings with Claire Balding, and he was asked about writer's block, and he said, "I don't believe in writer's block. I believe in writer's impatience." He said, I can no more produce a book early than a woman could give birth after 6 months or something like that." And
Yeah.
it's like, yeah, no, some things do just need to gestate and to sort of, you know,
Mm.
let the stew bubble away for a bit, and that's definitely what's been going on here.
Yeah, no, I think so. I think all the elements really, yeah. Yeah, no, I've been really enjoyed having getting the early drafts of the words and then knowing sort of where where the picture should fall, but then
Yeah.
through drawing one, sort of going back and revising it. And I've got loads to
Yeah, yeah,
go back and fine tune.
and again, you know,
Yeah,
we've got like what sort of about 3 weeks before we kind of nail it, and I think
yeah,
as it's all hotting up, as the stew is coming to a boil, there's going to be more of that in the next couple of weeks, and you know, great is at the moment. I love it, and everyone I've shown it to loves it. I had the absolute pleasure of reading it aloud to a group of about 15 friends in an Anglo-Saxon roundhouse a couple of weeks ago around the fire, and that went down so well. But I just know that in 2 weeks' time it's going to be even better.
yeah.
So yeah, quite excited
Mhm.
about that. I mean, I'm also
Oh,
slightly wary of, you know, I want to do things like put bits of it out there and do little readings, but I kind of thinking, oh yeah, but should I put this out and then it's going to change to something even better? But yeah.
oh yeah. I think people are used to that nowadays, I think.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, it's I think it's one of those things when where you see your own creations from your own perspective, you get very
Yeah.
you
Oh, can I
judge
ask?
it from a very different perspective than from someone else looking at it.
Yeah. I was going to say, could I ask you a question about it?
Yeah, sure.
Just about why did you decide to? What was the start of it? What was like the seed of the idea for King Arthur for you? How did you pick to do this?
Oh my gosh, it's a really long. I mean, I could talk on this for about an hour, and I am brewing a blog post on it, but I'm partly slightly reluctant to say it because it sounds so utterly bonkers. Um,
Fair enough.
I mean, starting from the pilgrimage I went on with 69 people to take the large hard on of the CERN Abbas giant in Dorset to the large hadron of the CERN collider in Geneva, and then as a little after oh, my internet connection's going funny. At the end of that, we ended up in Carl Jung's garden, where a friend of mine, Eric, who has an Anglo-Saxon longhouse, recited his version of Merlin's prophecy. And it was one of the most magical moments of my life. It was this lovely sunny day on the edge of Lake Zurich. As soon as he started speaking, a kind of the wind twisted around us, and there you could hear him perfectly, but everything else was wind around. He did this recitation for about 3 or 4 minutes, and then the wind just stopped again. So that gave me a real chill. And then a couple of weeks later, I was in a bookshop and I looked down at my feet, and on the bottom shelf there was a book that said Merlin, and I thought, oh, well, that's calling to me. I pulled it out and I was like, oh, okay, it's in like Middle English, right? I don't speak that. But I thought, well, I've got to buy it anyway. And it's about 400 pages long. I plowed through it, and almost right at the end, there was this story about this giant cat. And I thought, hang on, that's Monty Python.
Yeah.
And I didn't have the idea to do more with it then. I actually wrote a short story called English Humour, which is, although that's a misnomer because it's actually a French story of King Arthur, which is just two friends, just one of them saying, what? A cat? What, King Arthur? What? A kid in the Alps? Doing what? And it's just like not actually telling this story, but just increasingly incredulous. And that was my kind of, okay, well, this is what I can do with it.
Mm.
And then it wasn't until about another 6 months, a year after that, that I just thought, hang on, this story isn't out there anywhere. It must be my job to do it. So I just sat down and started writing it. And then as a kind of extra, I mean, it's built in layers and layers and layers. So this book is called The Prose Merlin. It's written in prose, as opposed to a lot of the kind of early Arthurian stuff is in alliterative poetry, like sort of Gawain and the Green Knight. And I just thought, just for a laugh, I'll write it in alliterative poetry as though it were Gawain and the Green Knight, but with a kind of modern Monty Python twist. So yeah, it just sort of built and built from
Yeah.
there.
Oh, that's fun. I
And
think
then I
yes.
started tweeting about it, and then you got in touch.
Yeah. No, that's good. I think it's good when there's multiple symbols sort of prompting you, and you can't avoid
Mm.
something, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You want layers, both visible and hidden, and yeah, like the magic that you managed to hide from Faber and Faber.
Yeah. No, I know. Yeah.
Yeah, speaking of mystical, magical things, I see from your email you sent me a couple of things, and my internet connection is dying. So I think maybe we should draw this to an end before we call down any more goat demons.
Yeah, I think maybe it's the
Um,
goat demons doing it.
yeah, but it's been a real pleasure talking to you, Max, and
That's fun.
I look forward to swapping some words and pictures with you over the next coming weeks. All right. There goes the internet again.